I am here with Stella and Darren. It's been a little bit since we've spoken in person. Glad to see you again. We're now in some of the temporary housing that you guys were able to eventually get out of hotels and into a house for a bit. So I'm happy for you that you've been able to kind of get out of that situation. Because the last time that we spoke, you were still in your home in East Palestine.
Right.
I guess if you don't mind kind of getting me up to speed on how that transition went, how was dealing with Norfolk Southern to be able to actually get relocated for quite a decent period of time.
Well, actually, when we were still in the house, I got really, really sick. I was like lethargic and dizzy. I had diarrhea really bad, muscle spasms in my legs. I could hardly get out of the chair. And I just kept getting sicker and sicker. So one day I just got in the car, and actually I didn't even tell him I was going. I got in the car and I drove over to the assistance center. And I told him, I said, my kids are getting nosebleeds, they're getting headaches, I'm really sick. And he said, let's just talk about this. And he said, you guys want to go to a hotel? He said, that's fine. He said, if you want to get out of town, he said, you can go ahead. And I'm thinking, okay, this was
before the...
Yeah, this was before the second voluntary
temporary
evacuation.
Okay,
It was
okay.
like 2 days before.
Before they announced it.
Before they announced it. So I'm like, okay. So,
Right, because at that point people had been kind of battling to try to get out.
right,
into other
and there was,
places.
everybody was sick, and the evacuation was over. They weren't helping anybody. So, I came home and I told Darren, I said, they're going to help us get a hotel. We packed up the kids. And the first time we went to a dirty little hotel in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
We packed in 2 rooms.
Mm-hmm.
We made the kids eat ramen noodles and pizza and so on. And I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you what, we're not doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and got a hotel in Canfield. And then 2 days later, the announcement comes out that they were doing voluntary evacuation. Well, then it kind of made sense that they had already planned on doing this
Right.
before I went over there. And we spent 2 months in hotels. Now, we did take the kids on a road trip.
Mm-hmm.
My kids, we have a therapeutic foster license. So all of our kids have mental, and they have trauma, they have a lot of disorders. And we had kept them locked up in that room.
Right.
And it was like, the one girl was pulling her hair. They went from straight A's in school to straight F's. I was trying to get them to do their homework. The little boy would bawl. It was just like a nightmare. Mm-hmm. So we took them on a road trip for 2 weeks. And when we came back, we went back over, and he said, we're renting 3 hotel rooms. We're eating out. And I mean, it was a hefty...
Oh yeah, I mean,
it was a hefty sum.
For anybody living in hotels for an extended period of time. A lot of people, from the outside are like, oh, these people just want a little vacation in their
yeah.
hotels, and it's no. Like, sure, it can be a vacation if you're actually, going
then,
somewhere for a couple days or something.
Then they
you
have the
prepare for it,
rooms
but-
booked
Yeah.
for the weekend, so they're like, you have to leave for 2 days. We don't have a room.
Right.
So we're packing up 3 rooms.
Right.
All these kids.
Right.
Moving to another hotel.
Right.
And
Not
then
if you don't have a stove, you don't
Right,
have
going back.
maybe you have a microwave. So to your point, you're ordering out for pizza, ramen noodles. You're not feeling good because you're not eating healthy.
Mentally, Darren and I have been together 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the same bed for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And we fight all the time about whether we should get rid of it. But, that's part of our 30 years. We have laid in that bed, we've talked, that's part of our comfort, part of our, and to get that taken away, and it's like, it was like a nightmare. Well, when we went back over, they said, you guys are spending a lot of money here, and you know, we need to do something else. I said, well, what do you want us to do? You know, there's, in regard to the kids, I mean, there's three rooms, but we can't, with our foster license, we can't put our little boy, 11-year-old boy, in with the girls, even
Right.
though they're his sisters. We can't put him in our room.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way the law is. We can't do that. So we got online and found this Airbnb over here, and they approved it. So, you know, we're here now, but I've tried going back to the house. We got 4 air purifiers. We have one in the attic, one in the basement, one on the other 2 floors.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that what we were going to do was we were going to try for me to go home like an hour or 2 every day
Mm-hmm.
and start cleaning the house and getting things ready. I was there, the first day I was there, an hour, and I felt my arms and legs start to tingle. I got a massive headache, and actually I had to leave my car there, and Darren had to drive me to the hotel. I started to cry on the way back, and it was burning my eyes. So every time I go in town, even if I'm there 15, 20 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
now he gets headaches once in a while, or he'll get the shakes,
Yep.
but he doesn't get it as bad as I do.
Right, and it seems to be affecting different people in different ways. I mean, the first 2 days we were back in town this trip, I wasn't really noticing anything, and then yesterday, partway through the day, we were near some of the creeks for part of the day. We didn't, we're not throwing rocks in the creeks or
Right.
anything like that. We were just objectively near them. The sulfur run runs right through town. And I said to Colin, I was like, I'm really starting to feel it now, actually. Like, we were on our way out of town anyway, but I'm like, I'm glad we're leaving town right now because I was feeling lightheaded,
Yeah.
a little foggy almost.
Uh-huh.
The second trip I was here, I got a real bad headache for the lasted couple hours. Some of the worst headaches I've ever gotten, essentially. And it seems to be affecting different people in different ways, but that makes sense. Everybody is a little bit different here.
Well, and I've really come to the conclusion that, and somebody brought this up, they said it's like when you do drugs, okay? The first time you do them,
Yeah.
you get really, really high, really, really fast.
Mhm.
And then the more you do it, that you build up an immunity
Right, a tolerance.
and
to,
a tolerance to it. And I think this is what has happened. Now, I just talked to my son right before you came in, and he said that it is really, really bad there today, that he woke up in the middle of the night, his throat was hurting really bad, he couldn't catch his breath, and he said that his eyes are burning this morning. He said it's really terrible there today. Now, what causes it to be worse on some days, I don't know whether it's the weather or what it is, but I mean, we have a neighbor who's 80 years old. She's never left her house. She's out there working on her garden and in her yard, and it makes me feel like, he could go home, and 2 of my kids could go home, but the other 2 kids, the ones that get the nosebleeds and throw up blood, they can't go home. I can't go home, and I know it's got to be, sometimes that he gets kind of like, he has to go in there every day and take care of the animals
Right.
and mow the grass. Nobody's coming to take care of our yard, and then I'm worried about him. Now there's people starting to say they have hypertension and
Right, and you don't know. It's like, it's one of those things. Just because you're not necessarily feeling the symptoms, is it potentially
Right.
still affecting you? And unfortunately, unless more of these sort of tests are made more widely available, we've spoken with probably, a handful of folks who've done these vinyl chloride urine tests at this point. Unfortunately, many of them are testing positive. Later today, we're going to go speak with the doctor who's been writing a lot of the prescriptions for them. It's nerve-wracking when you're starting to see people months later testing positive
Yeah.
for the metabolite from
Something's
vinyl
supposed to
chloride
last
in their
24 hours
Yeah.
in your system. So obviously, it's
And there's also
Still there.
the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people tell me, you're a money-grubbing faker. You people just are trying to get money. You're trying to get a handout. why don't you just leave town? I bet you I've been told 15 times, if you don't like it here, leave. And some of these people are people that were our friends. And it's a horrible feeling. And the bad part about it is, I don't know if it's going to get any better. I mean, like I said, I'm very hopeful because of this van that's coming in. Mm-hmm. Because they do take Medicaid insurance. Mm-hmm. And believe me, there's probably a good portion of the people in East Palestine that have that kind of insurance.
Right.
And I'm hoping that they get some of these kids tested because, again, that's one of my biggest concerns are these kids.
And I'll say for folks watching, the van that Stella is referring to is essentially a van that's going to come in and now, just as recently announced, they're going to help provide some of this vinyl chloride urine testing as well as potentially some other tests as well. Just like so many of the other things that have been brought up by residents, concerns by residents pushing, because as you've heard if you've been watching us, these tests were really difficult to get in the very beginning. In a lot of cases, the CDC recommendation was not to get these tests for a whole bunch of reasons that frankly are BS. The doctors weren't writing prescriptions for these tests in a lot of cases. The only reason most people got the test was because a chiropractor in town saw the need and was like, I've got the ability to write a prescription, I'm going to do it.
Our wonderful governor comes in and does a ribbon cutting ceremony for the new clinic. Mm-hmm. The new clinic won't test anybody.
Right.
They're trying to tell people that it's stress. Believe me, I'm almost 70 years old. I know what stress is. I've been through stress my whole life, every day of my life, and stress does not do what it's doing to some of these people. Mm-hmm. It's not stress related.
Right. And you mentioned hoping that we're able to get tests for some of the kids in town as well. I spoke with Chrissy Ferguson the other day, who lives right in East Palestine. She works in town. She's has one of the highest test results I've seen for the vinyl chloride test that happened. She talked about I believe it was her daughter's boyfriend, 18 years old, goes to school in town. He also did a test. Doesn't smoke, healthy. He's an athlete. Tested positive for vinyl chloride in his urine. 18 years old. He doesn't even sleep in town anymore. He goes to school in town.
Yeah.
And sleeps at home.
Why haven't
sleeps outside of town?
Some of this money, like for the community liaison, they gave him $1 million to spend. All right.
Mm-hmm. And this is the Norfolk Southern Community Liaison.
Right. They gave him $1 million to spend to help the community. So we've got all these little kids around all these creeks. They're in school. I mean, they're going through town. They're riding around all the toxic socks that were in the park all this time for 3 months. He goes and gets them all free ice cream cones at the Dairy Mill. Mm-hmm. And then he goes and lets people get their dogs' toenails trimmed at the grooming center for free. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, this is like insane. Why wouldn't you say, we got this $1 million, anybody that needs testing or anybody that's sick, come and get this done. The same way with the $1 million, it says specifically that Norfolk Southern gave the $1 million to the city to help the immediate community. So they changed the grass at the park. They put sod down at the playground. I don't understand why they wouldn't have said, we got this money, let's get these people tested and make sure everybody's healthy.
Right.
Who cares about your dog's toenails when people are sick?
Right. And frankly, I mean, these government agencies, the CDC, the EPA, you want to hope at one point in time that there was some element of trust in some of these agencies. You'd think when there's a disaster, they're going to be the ones to know what to do. Instead, what we've seen is, at best, incompetence from all of these agencies in the lack of transparency, them coming out and saying, yep, everything is safe before a lot of the residential air tests were done. Then we come to find out the residential air tests that they did, the EPA themselves admitted that the devices that were being used can't pick up all of the chemicals until they're well above the level that you shouldn't be in the home in a lot of cases. It's thing after thing after thing, and it's either incompetence or something a whole lot worse. I'm speculating at that point, but you would think that there would be some sort of a plan. Experts that I'm talking with are saying like, it would have been an easy decision to say, okay, let's, maybe you don't need to test everybody in the beginning, but let's pick 100 residents, 500 residents, and every week from the beginning of this on, let's test their blood and urine.
That's common sense. That's not rocket science.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable. I don't know. It's anybody at all knows what should be done, and these are supposed to be the experts, and they're doing exact opposite of what needs done. It like you said, I don't think it's incompetence either. I mean, nobody, they couldn't have gotten that position being that incompetent.
Right.
I keep going back to the very first meeting that we had downtown in Leicester. The scientist from Harvard was there.
That's the first time we heard about the dioxin.
That's the first time
we were at that meeting as well.
We heard about dioxin. I keep going back to what he said. He said that they will never look or find dioxin because it's spread so far and there's so much of it that it would cause economic devastation, because probably the whole eastern part of the United States, and he said they will never find it. He said it's all about the money. It would cause economic devastation. And if you think about it, if we know it went to Pennsylvania, we know it did.
Oh yeah, I mean the derailment happened 600 feet from Pennsylvania.
Right. It's in the water. They found it in the Ohio River. It's in the water. They can't get all that stuff out of the bottom of those creeks and stuff.
They're going to start dredging. They said the creeks. Well, it's already been 3 months.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to go halfway to China to get all that stuff out. It's just if it needed dredged, they should have started day one.
Right.
Not 90 days later.
Right. Yeah, and I mean they're done. There's we kind of went through town yesterday. I mentioned we were near the creeks, and part of the day all the aeration stuff is done, which is good and bad, right? Because like the aeration was also an issue. They're spraying that water up in the air, separating the chemicals in the water. They're taking it out of the water a little bit, sure, but then they're just spraying it up in the air right in downtown East Palestine, near a lot of folks' homes, businesses, all of this sort of stuff. That's done, but sure doesn't seem like the creek is sparkling clean. So.
Well, when you talk to Dr. Chai, that's what he did. He's like the crick guy.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So,
we've seen some of his videos.
Yeah, I mean, you poke that water and it's still underneath there. And like Darren said, it's been there 3 months in the bottom of that creek. It's in the creek beds. It's, so my point is that once, if the truth of the whole dynamic of what happened is found, it's not just East Palestine, it's not just Negley, it's not just Darlington.
Right.
It's going to be way out there, and the money not only to Norfolk Southern, but the money that it's going to cost the government is, and that pops into my head every time I have a conversation about this, is Lester saying economic devastation, because I didn't understand what he meant at that point in time, and now I get it, and it's all about the money. The whole thing is all about the money.
Right, and he described at that meeting, that was I had learned a lot about dioxin at that meeting, just like you all did. That was the kind of the first real time I heard it brought up in such a major way. He describes it, in that plume that we all saw in, the drone footage we've seen of the actual controlled burn that obviously wasn't controlled at all. The dioxin gets launched up into the air essentially, with all of the other chemical byproducts in there, and dioxin is heavier than air. So you saw that plume go up, you saw it spread out for miles and miles and miles, and like I said, dioxin's heavier than air. It slowly starts to settle in all of these places. There's a lot of agriculture in the area. It can land in these fields. An example that was given at that meeting was, let's say you're planting Brussels sprouts in the field. You've got dioxin in the soil right there. The Brussels sprouts kind of sucking in nutrients in the water and all this sort of stuff. The dioxin gets sucked into the Brussels sprouts. Now you're making Brussels sprouts for dinner. You eat them. you now have dioxin
Right.
in you.
And-
Same thing goes for dairy cows and whatnot. If they're grazing, eating grass, or even, you know, it doesn't have to be a dairy cow, any sort of cattle. They eat the grass that has, you know, dioxin in it. It's in their system. If you're eating that meat, if you're drinking the milk from the cow, it's that bad. These chemicals, they basically don't go away. They take years and years and years and years and years to be able to go away.
And you know, I think it's worth mentioning that this is another thing that I get from social media, people saying, well, oh, you're just listening to witch doctors and we're going to follow the experts like the EPA and the CDC, which hasn't even done anything.
Right.
But Dr. Lester is from Harvard.
Right.
He has been an expert in this field for decades.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about the guy that lives down the street,
No.
you know, who
And-
just made this stuff up.
and
This
it's not
this
just
man
him.
has written books. He
Right.
knows what he's talking about.
And it's not just him. I mean, you've got Dr. Andrew Welton, who works at Purdue University,
Yes.
doing this independent testing. Just about 2 weeks ago, he wrote an open letter to the EPA calling out I'm blanking on the specific words that he used, but on the poor execution
Right.
of this whole plan. And he's been pretty critical of the EPA
Right.
in a lot of his open letters and on Twitter and all these places. I've been speaking with several folks who have PhDs in chemistry, toxicologists. I'm speaking with former EPA officials who you know worked at the EPA for decades, have decades of experience on the job, who are all also saying, hey, this situation is being mishandled. So I understand, you know, in the beginning when people who aren't paying as close attention to this to be like, oh, you know, why aren't you listening to the EPA? I encourage those folks to actually take a second and look at what the EPA has done in East Palestine. The folks in East Palestine have no reason to trust these people at this point in time. They have lied on occasions. There's absolutely, in my opinion, a cover-up occurring in this town right before our eyes. We're seeing exactly what happened in places like Flint, Michigan. You know, they're kind of copy and pasting that playbook, but at a much more rapid pace. Right before our eyes, with everything that you're saying, even of dividing the town into, you know, you're saying you're having issues with friends who are calling out some of this stuff,
Yeah.
and they're dividing the different parts of town, because if everyone is divided, it's easier to frankly shut everybody up about
And
the
I
whole
mean, that was
situation.
strategic. Believe me.
Oh, yeah.
If I want to get to your family, you know where I'm going to go? I'm going to go talk to your grandma. I'm going to talk to the head of your family first, and I'm going to get grandma on my side. And then all the rest of you, grandma's going to make sure that all the rest of you are going to do what I say, because I've got grandma. And that's what Norfolk Southern did. They went right to the people who are the city leaders that are on the council, paid the city, paid the schools, paid the railroad. Paid the
Yes.
first responders.
I mean, all
Okay,
these school districts are suing Albany's Palestine where it happened, you know, all the, you know,
All the school
Ambridge
districts
and-
in the area
Right,
suing
you
Norfolk
know,
Southern.
they've all filed, you know, even Norfolk Southern stockholders have sued them, so.
Right.
I mean, it's so blatant that, you know, they're definitely negligent, but, you know, that something terrible happened here, and the experts and everybody's saying this happened, but nothing's being done about it.
Right.
I can't believe it.
No, I can't believe it either. I mean, this is I'm not naive to think that it was going to be this way, but I was hoping, you know,
Right.
on this third trip back here, that some answers were being given, some progress was being made on something, and frankly, I mean, I've been severely disappointed in that regard. That doesn't matter how I feel. It matters,
Right.
you know, what's
Right.
actually happening for you all. I can't believe that these questions still aren't being answered. You all are still needing to deal with Norfolk Southern to be relocated or to ask for help in some of these cases by problems caused by no fault of your own, only by them. It's ridiculous.
What about my grandkids and what they're going to have to deal with?
Oh yeah.
You know, 10 years from now, I'll probably be dead, but, you know, they're going to be 24 years old. They're going to be, you know, they're going to be 18 years old 10 years from now. They're going to be 13 years old. And, you know, this is going to affect them. And I tell people all the time, the fact that Norfolk Southern, that our governor had Norfolk Southern set up a fund for future illness. Now, again, You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what that means. That means that it's for future illness, so therefore, there's gonna be,
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm like, I tell people that, you know, when they tell me, oh, you're making this up, what about that?
Right.
You know, why do you think that fund was set up? I just don't get, I mean, I think that a lot of it is because people don't want to look, like you said, why don't they just look? You know, I Googled EPA and lies and 7 pages came up. And I tell people that all the time, you know, Google it. If you don't look and you don't see, then you can go ahead and believe what you want to believe. And I think that's a lot of what it is. People want to believe everything's fine. And now East Palestine has all this money, and we're going to put up some pretty little red curtains downtown, and we're going to plant some flowers and build this community center or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's going to be this perfect little Stepford town.
Right.
You know?
But to your point, I mean, the scary thing with all of this is, you know, health symptoms right now are scary, yes. But vinyl chloride is a carcinogen. The byproducts of vinyl chloride, like, these things cause cancer. That's not speculation.
Right.
That's reality. You know, I hope that, you know, that isn't going to be the case for a lot of you folks, and that you were able to get out in time. But only time will tell. But that's the harsh, scary reality of this, is that these chemicals cause cancer.
What about all the kids in town?
Right.
You know, all the ones that I told this when I talked to Jordan on one of my first interviews. You know, they were riding their bikes and pushing their baby strollers around containers of those contaminated socks that they used to suck up chemicals. They were riding their bikes and getting sprayed with the water that was shooting up out of the creeks. They're still sitting in school.
Right.
They're still playing in those creeks.
Right.
You know, to me, it is so overwhelmingly unbelievable. I get so stressed just thinking, you know, it's one thing, you're a full-grown adult. If you want to go down and play in the creek, then by all means you go.
Right.
But to see not just one kid, not just 2 kids, the schools are full. You know, they're all walking home. They're all over at the park playing. Everybody's all hunky-dory.
Right.
And what's going to happen when they find out that it is in fact contaminated, that there are toxins there? They act like this is this was the biggest catastrophic disaster in the history of the United States, and there's people in town that act like, oh well, there was a magic fairy that cleaned it all up in how long were we evacuated the first time? 48 hours.
Right.
And everything's safe.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I want to ask you, Darren, too, actually. I remember the last time we talked, you mentioned, and a lot of folks share a lot of these concerns, too, with, you know, keeping animals and having a garden and whatnot. I think you said you had rabbits.
Yes.
I guess, are you still having concerns with that, or what's the status on?
Well, I still have the rabbits, but, you know, I mean, I've been feeding them bottled water, and I get all the fruit at the feed mill, so it's not like they're out eating the grass.
Right.
But, you know,
How about birds and
still,
squirrels?
but you know, still, I started raising rabbits to eat them. I don't think I'd want to eat any of them rabbits now.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like everything else, the uncertainty. I'm sure somebody knows the answer, but, you know, it's kind of like COVID. We only know what they're telling us.
Right.
So, and which is fortunately isn't very much, and
not
about half of
telling
it's
us.
true.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
But I've been going home and working and cutting grass and stuff, and you know, raking leaves. I can definitely tell when I've been to town. I mean, not that I get violently ill, but it's something's not right, and you know, it's like. Used to go to a motel for a little break. Now my going home's my break, and it's terrible. You know, I don't want to live here. I put my whole life in my house. That's where I want to stay. But you know, with her getting sick, it's not an option now. And they keep saying it's going to be okay, but you know, it's like I said, it's been 3 months, and it's as bad now as it's ever been. So you know I just don't know what's going to happen.
No, it's again 3 months later. We're literally just a day after the 3-month anniversary of this, folks still dealing with, getting sick while they're in town. You've still got contaminated creeks in town. You've got folks still needing to, in some cases you're able to relocate for a bit, which I'm really happy that you all have been able to. Some folks aren't able to relocate. The rules of the assistance center still all over the place.
Well,
there is no set of rules, it seems like.
I have had so many people tell me how they were treated when they go there, and how they waited in lines and so on. And I have to say, and I don't know what the reason is, that has not been my experience at all.
That's good, yeah.
They have been very compliant. I don't wait in line. When I get there, and I told Darren the last time we went, I said, it just makes me feel, I don't know, like somehow bad about the way I get treated, because I've heard other people say, and there's no rhyme nor reason.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you what, those people that work there, they have no more of an idea.
No.
What's going on. And I told the guy the last time, they're moving to that church in East Palestine.
Okay, they're moving
and
over.
the creek runs right behind there.
That's what I told him. I
They'll
said,
find out.
I told him, I hope you have at least 10 people here. And he said, why is that? And I said, because I guarantee 2 or 3 of them are going to be sick.
A lot sick of
and
it,
he just kind of looked at me. But, I could see the concern in his face,
they're
too.
going to find out fast.
They leased that place for 2 years, Rebecca Place.
They have no idea. They thought that they were, actually at one point, they thought that they were going home at the end of last month. Oh, this will be our last week here. And I'm like, what? I don't think so. Well, what? Why? You know what I mean? They're as much in the dark.
Right.
And to be fair, there's 4 of them over there, and there was times when there was hundreds of people.
Oh yeah.
Out there waiting.
Right. The first time we were in town, there was a line out the door. There was. Yeah. We got there 2 hours before it opened, and the line was 60 people deep.
Right.
And by the time the doors did open, there were probably 200 people waiting in line.
And the fact that they're not helping people outside that 1 mile zone, that makes me sick. There are people that live on Sulphur Run, right beside where my daughter Jamie's house is, and she's like right on the border. So the next house wouldn't qualify in the 1 mile area.
But clearly that, I can say from personal experience that creek, especially,
my God.
especially they had the aeration stuff going on right there for a while, but even now being around the creek is not good.
She sent my daughter Jessie, Jamie sent her over to her house the other day to get something. Now Jamie hasn't been in there for 3 months. Jessie opened up the door and walked in.
Jessie been staying at home at our house in town. Because, I really don't want to leave it there unattended anyhow.
Yeah. So the only thing that happens to Jessie, 2 fingers on her left hand are numb. But she has not, she was in the military in Iraq and so on. So she's had a lot of immunizations and, but she went in that Jamie's house, and she said as soon as she walked in, she said it was like somebody sucked her breath away. Oof. That she got burning in her nose and her lips and her eyes. She said her eyes started to tear. She called Jamie, and Jamie told her, get out. Get out. She said, do not go back in there without a respirator. Okay? You can see the other houses along that creek. Those people aren't in the 1 mile.
Right.
Now, you can't tell me that those people are not getting sick, are not breathing in those chemicals. This magic 1 mile circle that they built.
That's a bubble.
And that's what I told Darren. And initially, it was for what, the shrapnel.
Right.
Okay, so what does that 1 mile have to do with anything? The first night of the evacuation, he said, I got to take the kids to the high school. We got evacuated. He said, come on. I said, well, I'm not going.
Right.
What do you mean you're not going? I said, well, do you think the air at the parks or at the high school is any different than the air here? Where they came up with this 1 mile, but those people, I feel so bad because they have got to be suffering living right on that creek like that. And why aren't they getting helped? What about the people in Darlington, people in Negley? When it first happened, him and I rode to Negley, and we got...
We come around the first bend right where Leslie Run almost meets Bull Run, and it was, the smell there was stronger than I ever smelled it in Palestine. Yep. And like the first day I couldn't figure out why, actually it would have been upwind, so, but, well, 2 and 2 made sense, it's in the water.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I didn't speculate that the first time I smelled it, but.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time again to meet with us. Unless there's anything else you definitely wanna share.
Well, I definitely want to thank you guys for staying
staying
on
on
this
this.
the way that you have, because the media, they have just packed up and left.
Well,
and
I have saw a professional news van in Palestine the last couple of days. I don't know what it's doing there.
Right.
My dog's on the run, but it's set up. I haven't seen them doing any interviews or anything, but
Right.
Well, I think
there's
the
a
fact,
presence there for something.
I think the fact that BlackRock owns, most of the news outlets. I mean, I know even the hotel we stayed in, initially they said we could do interviews there. And then the manager came and he said that the owner said absolutely not. Darren looked up their chain, and who owned Vanguard?
Vanguard and
Vanguard
BlackRock.
and BlackRock owned it.
Yep, and yeah, I mean Vanguard, BlackRock, J.P. Morgan, they all own big stakes in Norfolk Southern as well. So it doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I mean we're gonna continue talking about this because
Well, we certainly
frankly,
appreciate it, because that's what, that's the only thing I think that is keeping anybody even remotely interested is that at least you guys are coming and still talking to us
Digging.
and
Keep digging,
you're still digging into what's behind some of this stuff, and hopefully you'll dig up something really, really great.
I hope so too. We're close, so I'll
good.
That's
well,
I
good.
keep thinking every one of these days I'm going to pick up my phone and the truth, this whole thing's going to come out, and it's East
Yeah.
Palestine needs evacuated, or I don't think that the outcome's going to be good.
right. Well, I hope we're able to have a small part in doing that. Thank you both so
Thank
much.
you,
We
Lewis.
really appreciate it.
Thank you,
It's good to
guys.
see you all
Thank
again.
you, guys.
Yep.